Here's a fun coincidence. Jake Gyllenhaal in this film and Patrick Swayze in the original Roadhouse film were also in Donnie Darko together. That's kind of a fun coincidence. Hey guys, this is Jason. Today I'm reviewing Roadhouse, directed by Doug Liman and stars Jake Gyllenhaal, and is a remake of the Patrick Swayze film. A former UFC fighter played by Gyllenhaal, who has been trying to get away from his past, gets a job at Florida Keys at a roadhouse as a bouncer. But he soon finds out that things in Florida Keys aren't all that cracked up to be when he finds out about this group that want him dead. You wanna know how I found out about Roadhouse growing up? If you already know, then say with me in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Family Guy. I mean, if you've seen that episode of Family Guy where Peter Griffin just kicks everyone and just says Roadhouse every time, you can't help but think of that whenever you watch the original Roadhouse film. Keep the change. Roadhouse. But then later watched the film itself, which I didn't grow up watching that film as a kid. I watched it for the first time in my early 20s a few years ago. And I remember thinking that this is an okay action film that can be very cheesy at times and very silly, and it also has some very dated and sometimes questionable dialogue. But I was still interested in seeing this film because Doug Liman is directing it, and Doug Liman has made some pretty good action films like The Bourne Identity and Edge of Tomorrow, which is my favorite film of his, and not only is it one of my favorite action movies of all time, but I also consider it one of the more underrated action films. And Jake Gyllenhaal is one of my favorite actors of all time. I've loved him in almost every film I've seen him in, so seeing both him and Doug Liman do a movie together does give it some potential, and I am going to say that this is an enjoyable action film. Now, it's not one of the best movies I've seen of all time. I have some issues with the film, but I will save those for later, so I'm just going to talk about the good first. One of the biggest highlights of this film, in fact it might be the biggest highlight of the film, is the action sequences. The way they are shot and filmed and the stunt team that they use for the film definitely make the action a lot of fun to watch. There are definitely some creative shots for the action sequences, like there's this one POV shot where a character is getting punched in the face and you see how it looks and you feel the impact when that happens. If there's one thing in this film we can agree is the best part of the film, whether you like the film or not, it would definitely be the action sequences. I like Jake Gyllenhaal as Dalton. I thought he was pretty good in the film, and his version of Dalton is a little more subdued because, without giving anything away, his character does have a very troubled past when he was a UFC fighter, and he's trying to move on from that and have a fresh start when it comes to Florida Keys, but of course, things don't always go as planned for him once this group finds out about him working at this roadhouse. Then there's Conor McGregor, who is one of the main villains of the film, and this is also, according to IMDb, his first feature film. And I really don't know much about Conor McGregor other than what my brother and my dad have told me about him, and without giving anything away, his character in this film is pretty crazy. And I think for this film it works for his character, and I thought Conor McGregor did a pretty good job in this film, although at times he can overact in a few scenes, but I'm not gonna go too hard on him because, like I said earlier, this is his first film. Now, where the film falters for me is that whenever Dalton goes outside of the roadhouse and starts to get to know some of the other characters around this town, it can drag a bit, and you don't really learn a whole lot about the characters that he meets. I mean, you do get some of that, but you don't get it with every character of the film, so you don't really feel that much like tension with some of them whenever the action is going on. Like, there's this one girl that he meets in the film who later becomes his love interest and becomes important later in the film. Like, again, without giving anything away, there's a character that's related to her but is also a part of this bad group that Dalton is trying to get rid of. Like, that type of subplot could would make the film more interesting if they explored it more, but they don't. They really don't explore it, and they barely mention it, just like they do for the rest of the subplots in the film. I also would have liked a little more scenes where Dalton is teaching the other guys in the Roadhouse how to be like bouncers like he is, and that's what the first film had. Where in the original Roadhouse, Patrick Swayze's Dalton was in one scene where he's getting some of the other guys to be like bouncers, but I mean, you do get some of that in this film, but only with two guys there. You don't really get a whole lot with the other members of this Roadhouse. And my last issue with this film is most of the villains in this film, besides Conor McGregor. They're just this very generic gang where the leader of the gang is just this rich guy that gets upset whenever his plans don't work out because Dalton is there messing them up. And most of them don't really work for this film by just being generic or over the top, but maybe it works for Conor McGregor because his character is over the top. But with some of the other villains, like the main rich guy who's the leader, can get really hammy and don't make him a very interesting villain whenever Dalton is just messing things up for him. Now, if anyone hasn't watched the original Roadhouse film and are going into this film with an open mind, they're probably not gonna like this film because it can be over the top and silly at times, especially in the third act, which I do understand those complaints if people aren't enjoying this film because of that. But I think that's what they were going for with this film, because if you go back and watch the original Roadhouse film, I mean, that movie's over the top as hell. And another reason I can give this film a pass for having that is because Doug Liman is known for directing some over the top action films as well. I mean, he's made movies like Mr. and Mrs. Smith and Jumper. Both of those films are very silly and over the top. So I can kind of understand why they would choose Doug Liman to direct this film, because he's known for directing some over-the-top action films and some really good action films like Edge of Tomorrow. Roadhouse 2024 isn't an amazing film. It does have some pacing issues, barely any character development, and mostly weak villains, but it does make up for that with some really fun action sequences, a good performance from Jake Gyllenhaal, and it's a very cheesy, fun time to watch. So if you love the original Roadhouse film and hated the fact that we got a remake of the film, I'd say at least give this movie a chance. You might have a fun time watching it. And even if you're not a fan of the original Roadhouse film, I think you might still enjoy it, or maybe not, because I do understand that this movie might not be for everyone, because it can get pretty over the top at times. I'm gonna give Roadhouse 2024 a B-. So guys, if you have seen this remake of Roadhouse, what do you think about it? Did you think it's maybe as good as the original Roadhouse, or do you think it disgraces the original and it should not exist? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss a thing, because it helps my channel grow. Hit the notification bell so you know what other videos I'm posting. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.